So, good evening, everybody. For the sake of the recording, it is Tuesday, the 27th of June, 2023 at 7:20. My name is Debbie Ann, Jamie's Sanctuary, and today I've asked my friend Ian to come along and share his experience on still allowing people who are struggling, with mental health, addiction, suicide, ideation, to let them know that the story doesn't need to end here. So, Ian, thank you for coming along. I know it's a difficult subject to talk about. There's a lot more now that people are starting to speak out. And, we had a wee bit of conversation before we started, and I myself, I've lost, for people who don't know, I lost my son Jamie just 6 months ago, December last year, to suicide. Jamie had just turned 20 in November and took his life in the December. And I, as a parent, I went looking for things to help me grieve and to try and understand the process of Jamie's death, and there was nothing there. And this is when I decided, something more needs to be done. This needs to be spoke about. And obviously, I know yourself, Ian, and I know your story. I've got the pleasure to have met you almost a year ago. Well, I'm coming up a year, clean and sober myself, and I met you in a fellowship. And I was just, for the first time I met you, I was blown away with you, Ian, and how honest you are and how much you speak for the heart. And that's why I knew that you would be the perfect person, to come and address almost this situation, because you speak so freely, so openly and so honest. And in Jamie's Sanctuary, like, I vouch for that, because all we have in life is our experience and our honesty. And if we share for the heart, then it's always going to be the truth. So if you don't mind, if you could just come in, just tell us who you are, and maybe give us a little bit about you, kind of where you've came from, and what took you up to that point where you felt that your story had to end. And then I'll come back in and I'll ask you some questions on that, if that's all right with you.
Of course. Thank you so much for asking me to come along. And I think talking about these things, I mean, I'm coming up for 39, so I was born in 84. We didn't talk about anything in Scotland in the 90s and in the early 2000s. We thought people that talked about things were American, like Americans did therapy. And I think, like, on reflection, hindsight's 2020, but my house wasn't a hotbed of mental health. There was a lot of dysfunction there, and it's quite easy to identify it, I guess, once you're out the other end of it. But when you're in it and you're a child, it's just normal. So I just want to clarify a couple of things before I go on, which is, this is my experience and my opinions on my experience. I'm not a mental health expert. I don't pretend to be some kind of like YouTube counselor, because I watched Grey's Anatomy a couple of times. Like, I don't think I'm any more qualified. This is just my story. And I've always said that the greatest tool we have is our story, because it can help someone. And it's the only way I've been able to reckon with the experiences I've had, because if I'm still here, this had to have been worth something. Otherwise, I went through all that hell for nothing. So I would say that I was thinking a lot about this topic, specifically this part of my story, because, as you know, in recovery, this becomes one of many things that you might talk about, like dysfunctional families, substance abuse, drinking, partying, sex conduct, all the other stuff. But, like, there's a couple of things I never really gave it enough attention to until I went into therapy a couple of years ago, which is, I ended up homeless in my active addiction, which I used to skirt through that part of my story like it was a laugh, and how planned and sure and relieved I was at suicide. you know, when I came to a decision that this was going to be what the future would be best for me and for everyone else, I felt at that time as relieved about the future as I did getting clean and sober. That's the weird thing about it. I remember thinking it was the best idea I'd ever had. And it was gonna, I was going to be able to stop hurting people by just not being around. And, you know, I was sectioned here in Barcelona where I live, and everyone had the same story, you know. And when we woke up in those wards, none of us were happy to be alive. There wasn't a relief. There wasn't a, oh, thank God, that was a mistake. It was someone is getting in the way of my plan. So obviously I was very unwell then, but I have a real appreciation for why people commit suicide. I feel sorry that there isn't another, you feel like there's not another option. And if you are considering suicide, it's a really long-term solution to a short-term problem. And there are 7 billion people plus in the world. Google how bad your life is and somebody's done something worse. All right. Like, so yeah, I'm actually I was born and raised in Port Glasgow. And I grew up quite an okay kid, actually, even though, I mean, it's a really rough town, and I was a really gay kid. But somehow I got through it, no scars on my face to speak of. And you know, I got a big personality, so I was in like a silver tongue. So I think I was always able to make friends with anybody. You know what I mean? I always made friends with the biggest rugby player in high school, and he usually stopped me getting a doing at parties. When I got drunk and started calling people names. But when I did used to go to church as well. I think I was always kind of looking for something. My family didn't go to church. I was 16. I was at this weird age where I didn't want to hang in the streets. I went to a youth group, and well, I was 16 when I remember that would have been the first time when I remember the idea, like knowing about the idea of suicide, really, and feeling very overwhelmed with my schoolwork because this was what was going to get me out of where I was. My parents, you know, which was awful. I hated living with them, all this other stuff. And I'm sure I wasn't, if you're out there, mum and dad, hi, but like, you know, I'm sure I wasn't a dream child either, but I was a child. And I told a lot of lies, you know, about the house I was in. It was an alcoholic house, so I lied about what was going on in my house. And I made up stories about kind of who I was and what I was into. And, you know, I didn't really, that was a big fantasy, was my first addiction. And I would say, I remember being at church youth group and talking to someone once about, well, sure, if this doesn't work out, we can all just, you know, take an overdose or something. Like I remember saying something like that. And one of the youth leaders feeling like, do I need to talk to this person? Is everything all right? Do we need to talk to them? And I remember thinking, no, it was just something silly I said. But other people were not saying silly things like that. So maybe there was part of me that was a bit morbid. And what I will say is that there was times, you know, I'm at 18, 20, 23, where I woke up in hospital because I'd taken overdoses, and the psychiatric care there at the hospital said, I remember it was my 23rd birthday, and I'd been up for 4 days, and the nurse asked me, why did you try to kill yourself? And I said, it was my birthday, I was having a good time. And he said, were you? You know, and then I was like, yeah. And I always thought that I'd just overdone it, you know. But in hindsight, when I think about what I was doing to myself and that kind of lack of care for myself, or maybe it wasn't an obvious plan, but my life was a bit all over the place, and I mean, I wasn't stopping, right? Like I'm not saying everybody with addictions issues is a candidate for suicide, but what I'm saying is that lack of care for yourself is certainly a road towards it. And I don't have regrets in my life, or I try not to have regrets in my life. Well, one or two, but like the theme of all my life has been I've never known how to ask for help. Now, I don't know why that is. I don't know. Like I says, I was born in '84. We didn't talk about things in my house. We screamed at each other. It was a shouty house. And I think there is something to be said for those experience you have when you maybe try and ask for help and it's kind of shot down. And I remember having a big argument with my mum when I was a kid and saying, this is exactly what I spoke to the teacher about. This house is mental. And maybe her memory of this is different, or maybe she has no memory of this. But at that time, instead of her being concerned about me being so stressed, I was talking to my teacher. She got drunk and called all her friends and cried and says I was telling the school she was a bad mum.
Mm.
And so her response to me having problems was she was being picked on, right? So we just didn't ask for what we needed in my house. And I found out in therapy, and again, I'm no therapist, but the therapist told me that if you grow up in a house where your needs are not met, then you go through your life believing you have no needs. And I think if you'd asked me in my 20s, was it you needing a partner? Was it you needing a job? I just said I was a really chill person, I didn't need much, do you know what I mean? But I was constantly disappointed and
Right.
people would never meet my expectations. And so, I drank and drug my way through my 20s. I was living in Barcelona from when I was 27, and I was homeless by the time I was 31. And I am really fast. And if that's not a sign of loneliness, I don't know what is, because it wasn't like I didn't know anybody. I've always known people, but I would rather have been homeless than admit that I was struggling, right? So, and then, I've not been connected to my family. I haven't seen my family since I was just turned 19, so 20 years. And as you know, I recently connected with some family about a year and a half ago, my auntie, my uncle, who, when they found out I'd been homeless, had said, you could have come and stayed here in Greenock with us, and I hadn't spoken to them in like 18 years, So I think like it's really interesting because I think by the time I got to that point, I was convinced there was nobody, but there wasn't nobody, right? And I think as well, as if anybody is watching this and they feel like they're alone, ask somebody if that's true, because that was all in my head. I can still feel like that now. I'm going to be 6 years clean and sober next month.
Okay.
And at 5 years clean and sober, I had felt suicidal again. There was no plan, but the thoughts were coming, and the thoughts were I was alone, that there was nobody. It was just me. And when I was so I'm 31, I've been homeless. I get saved from the streets. I start lying again and using people's money, and it's fancy way of saying stealing. and and then realizing that I was just always going to be this person. Nothing was ever going to change. This is exactly how I was thinking. You are broken, you're sick, you're done. And I sat at this bar and I was buying like €1 beers, tanning them back right now. All my problems, drunk, alone, And I was like, the problem is me. Like, the thing that connects all my issues is me. And that is true, right? My solution was, I'll just kill myself. And I remember having this wave of just relief, And the biggest fear I had at that point was it not working. And so me being me, I had an Excel that I did on my computer because I needed some statistics. Now, I did Google some stuff, and there is a website that I won't name here because, again, I don't want to promote anything. But this website is there to not encourage you to commit suicide. It actually says on it, we don't want you to commit suicide, right? But here are the numbers and the figures and the stats. And just so you know, right? So throwing yourself in front of a train has one of the lowest success rates than you would imagine. Things like this, right? All of this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And so hanging yourself, like it goes through everything, right? The stats, the things that could go wrong. It wants you to have the numbers, right? But it does say, please call out for help. And I looked on this website 3 or 4 times a day. I was like, is there a building high enough in Barcelona to guarantee my death? There wasn't one that was easily accessible, right? I found out a lot of information, and I only talk about this because I didn't tell anyone this was how I was feeling. I was sure this was a really good idea. And now that I'm a much better person, like not maybe a better person, but a more well person, shall we say, hindsight, I look at that and I go, that was mental. How it really frightens me how it was like a job. Like I'm quite professional at work and I treated it like a job. It was like there was numbers and stats and figures and dates. And then, once I had the idea of what I was going to do, my choice was going to be an overdose. Was getting the right medicines from different people, this pharmacist for anti-sickness drugs, because I didn't want to throw up and all the. And I went to a really secluded area of Barcelona and I'd written 2 notes, which I forgot about this until recently. I was in a trip to Glasgow and I was asked to come and share at a meeting. And I remember I had a note from my friend who I was living with, who had given me a place to live when I was homeless, and one from my best friend back home with his phone number on it because I wanted him to know in person, not by the papers, because I was going to make the papers, obviously. I don't really pick the photo. And also what to do with my dog, right? That was all I could think about was, right, Haskell? This is what you need to do with the dog. Like, just, and I go up to the back of Barcelona where there's a castle in it, and there was a mixture of pills, drugs, alcohol, all these other things, and then like anti-sickness and then sleeping pills. And then I'm out, and when I wake up, I'm like throwing up everywhere. I've had my stomach pumped. They've got me on an IV. I'm screaming and shouting, and I'm usually very nice to medical staff. I'm all over the place. I don't know what's going on. They strap me to bed. They inject me with something. I'm like kind of woozy. They're telling me that I was like, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. And they're like, we've been through your bag. We know what your plan is, and you can't leave. You're going to hurt yourself. And I was like, I know. Like, and that was kind of the beginning of the end for me. I mean, and I ended up sectioned for a couple of months, and being in a psychiatric hospital. To be honest with you, if I was feeling like that again, and when I was feeling like that last year, I was thinking about voluntarily going into hospital, like because sometimes what it gave me was I was away from my phone, I was away from computers, I was away from everything, and I was surrounded by people who were talking the same language, not literally the same language, but like which was quite frightening. But like they were all everyone. I didn't feel so alone, and after that it wasn't really the end because I came out there with a diagnosis that wasn't real. I also couldn't be honest. I started drinking and drugging again, and a year later I was in the same place. And well, you'll know this part of my story, but the end of my drinking and drugging in 2017, I was out for my birthday, my actual birthday, which is July 9th, and I got clean on the 13th. And my life was falling apart all over again. You know what I mean? Like I was really, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, you need to sort this out because last year you had this amazing idea and everybody got in the way. And I think it's just God's will that you're not here. Like I've tried the 12-step program, I've tried, I thought I'd tried. And I remember leaving because I was going to go make another attempt. I was like, fuck it, let's try the train, And I blacked out, which I don't usually, well, I never really did. And when I woke up, I was in the psychiatric hospital where I had been getting outpatient treatment for the last year anyway. And they told me that I'd brought myself in, and I said, please don't let me leave. I don't think I can be trusted with my own life. And, you know, I still believe that to be true. And I think that if I've been able to analyze my own story over the last year or so, you know, when I've really allowed myself to dig into it, when I choose to do things alone, I'm one step closer to my solutions. And killing myself was the best thing I could come up with. That was the best I could do. And so I think if people are struggling and people are feeling like they want out, and I get why people want to get out, right? I was in debt. I had been homeless. I had annoyed everybody I've ever, you know, I'd stole money. I thought the worst of the worst, and that life was over for me at the age of 33. And it had only just begun, you know. And I know that if I could do anything differently back then, I would have talked about how I was feeling, because it turned out what I was feeling that whole time was not true.
Mm-hmm.
It was my story. And when I'm not well, the story I'm telling myself is never a positive one. It even happens now. If anyone's ever had the experience of being in work, their boss saying, I need to talk to you later, and then walking away from your desk. No one ever thinks it's a promotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks they're about to get into trouble, right?
Yeah.
I still get like that. And therefore, as someone who is a manager in work, I'm very careful with the way I communicate, because you can steal people's peace with the blanks. And I know for me, the blanks, I always fill with my own experiences. And my experiences have not been good, right? There's a little bit in me that's still there. And I heard recently at a group that until you completely take suicide off the table as an option, you're not completely free. And I would say I'm not completely free, right? Because even now, it coming up to 6 years clean and serene and all that sort of stuff, and I've got a very good life now, and I have a lot to live for. You know, I'm as sure about life now as I used to be about death. I always say that because it's so true. But it's always that option where my mind wants to wander. It's not drinking drugs, it's suicide. And so I have to just pay attention to that. And when I feel like that, to talk about it. Suicide for me and for many people I've spoken to is not this overwhelming thing one night and they throw themselves off a balcony. It's often planned, thought about, considered. It's years of building up internal disappointment, carrying baggage, silence. You know, if someone is silent,
Mm-hmm.
those are the people I'm worried about. The
Yeah.
people that withdraw, right? The people that tell you, I feel like I'm going to kill myself, they want your help.
Mm-hmm.
Give them it, even if you think it's a cry for help, right? But if someone is quiet, these are the friends of mine who frighten me, because you one day, the two people I've lost to suicide recently, I didn't know anything was wrong. And they never said anything was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if they had said something, maybe someone could have made them feel less alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my part on that.
Amazing. You know, I picked up, you know, loads of kind of words that you were saying there, you know, that feeling less than, you know, feeling alone. I think many people, you know, me myself have been in that place. I've never tried suicide, but I wanted to die. I just didn't, you know, a bit like you when you said, I'm the kind of person I used to think to myself, if I take my life, it probably won't work. And I'd get annoyed at myself when I can't even do that right, do you know? And again, it's that less. I'm not even feeling good enough to take my own life, do you know? And what I wanted to ask you, you know, you shared that kind of last story there, when you decided that, you know, you were going to take yourself away and you were going to do this, and you'll know the answer to this. And I spoke to somebody recently who was not a suicide survivor, but had just read something somewhere, and he said that he believed that when a human being makes that decision to take their life, it no longer becomes emotional or psychological, it becomes physical. And it's almost like something takes over a part of their brain when they've committed to that, and it's like there's no coming back. So I don't know, like for you, when you were in that situation, when you had obviously you'd done all this planning, and I'll never know if that was the same for Jamie. I don't think it was, but do you know, for you, and this is a burning question that I would love to ask my son. Do you know, when you made that decision, was it I can't come back now? Did you feel like it was something physical that you just couldn't retract from?
I felt like the debate was over. I actually, like it didn't even occur to me that I would want to come back from that, because when I remembered it, I remember being relieved. And, I've done a lot of shit in my life, and I've hurt a lot of people. I'm not sitting here, it's very easy to come out the other end of this and be like, well, I was sick, I wasn't well, or, I mean, like I've worked through all that. And, I did the dirty on a lot of folk. I haven't spoken to my family in a really long time. They have their problems, but, I had mine. And I'll tell you a story. When I was in the hospital, my friend Julie said to my best friend, we've been friends since we were 4, and he said to my best friend, reach out to my best friend in Scotland and said, should we contact his family? Surely they'll want to know. And for some reason, he thought it was a good idea to contact him, which is amazing to me because, lots of shit had gone down and he'd witnessed the whole thing, right? But I guess there's part of him that always romanticized family because he's got a great family. His mum is like my mum. Hiya. And hi, Elaine. And I shopped for other mothers when I was a kid, but he did contact actually my sister, and apparently the response was, well, he's made his fucking bed. Right? And so that was the opinion of me from where I came from, right? So this was the sort of stuff that was going on in my head. And this is the kind of sickness that runs in my family, right? I can't diagnose them, but I remember thinking this was in my DNA, that I was quite an evil person, that I was inherently bad. And when I thought, God, if I just do this, I remember that feeling of being like, how wonderful it is going to be for everyone else. Like I genuinely believed, and now I know this is not true, right? But I thought everybody'd be like, well, thank fuck for that. I really thought that. And it was about, I didn't see how I was ever going to stop harming people. That every year that I got older, what I was doing was worse. My life was getting worse year on year. And by the time you get to 31, it's a lot of years of evidence that might suggest you're a shit person, And so I think once I'd made the choice, it was this euphoria almost of being like, oh my God, I wish I could tell people because this is brilliant. And being really happy, hanging out with people thinking, I'm going to make a real effort because this is going to be the last time they see me. Like this was the stuff I was doing. And it makes me sad to think that that's where I was. But, again, I share really honestly about it because I, for a long time, thought it was only me that ever happened to. And it turns out it's quite it's quite common when people decide they're going to take their own life that there's a euphoria and a relief and an almost like the pain is over.
Well, see, that kind of like leads me on to my next question, right? Because I think this is the one that kind of tears me apart as a parent, and I think about Jamie, I think about him up there and my son hung himself, right? And I think about him there in those last moments, that when he made that decision and when he did it, and I personally, that's the bit that cuts me up, is me thinking his thoughts, and I can't do his thinking, but I think to myself, I know the minute he did that, he regretted it, and there was no coming back, right? That because, like I say, I'm doing my son's thinking, and I often wonder that, and maybe you have got a different perspective on it, and you kind of almost answered that, but when when you get to that stage and you're explaining it, it feels euphoric, and but when you did it and when you took or used your mixture of tablets and stuff, and they all kind of started to kick in. I know you blacked out, but was there any point where you think, shit, I shouldn't have done this?
No, actually, when I woke up in the hospital, I tried to charm my way out. And for the whole first 8 days, 9 days, um I was in the psych ward. My plan was to get out and finish the job.
Right.
And they medicated me, and again, I'm pro medication, pro antidepressants. There's a reason why psychiatrists should give you those, and it's not your GP that should be flinging them at you, because some people with suicidal ideation get antidepressants, and the thing that stopped them killing themselves is their depression, because they
Mm-hmm.
have no willingness. Antidepressants, one of the side effects is suicide,
Mm-hmm.
because you suddenly have the energy to do it. And
Yeah.
so I'm very much in agreement with psychiatric medication, but supervised by a medical professional and follow up and all those things. And I
Right.
was very lucky where I live in Spain. This was pre-pandemic as well. So the hospital system is very good, but the psychiatric care in this country is excellent. And the psychiatric ward I was in, I had one other roommate. It was very good food. It was really nice. And they took excellent care of us. And, I'm so grateful to those doctors. It wasn't what I needed in the end, because I got clean and sober now. But I went back and thanked them all when I got a year sober, because they were part of what got me in.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, by the time they had me on the right balance of antidepressants, and I was able to talk honestly with doctors. I used to lie to them, and they said, "We're not going to judge you about all the shit that you've done in your life. We just want to do our job."
Yep.
We're medical professionals. Once I started opening up to them about what was going on, I found that maybe I could be wrong about
Mm-hmm.
dying.
See, people, what, there's like a petition out, that we're not allowed to see people committed suicide, but it's just like death by suicide, or they've took their own lives. But for me, I feel like when I say committed suicide, like it's making that commitment almost to, like, I've committed to this and there's no coming back for it now. And even just speaking to you tonight, Ian, and you saying what you're saying has really helped me. Because that's the biggest thing for me, is I don't question why. I know why, because I've been there myself. But it's for me, it was I think he regretted that. That's what, I can't move past that, because I think he didn't really want to do that, because me as a mother, it's like there's no way my son would want to take his life when and he's got a good life, and he's, got a good mum, and but that's me. That's like you've explained that wholeheartedly, how there's two different sides to it, like it's what your mind wants you to believe, and then there's the actual what we see outside of that. Um,
I
and
think though, I think to just, because I hear what you're saying, and I can't speak for Jamie, and I would never want to, but I know from other friends of mine that I am actually still friends with my roommate from the psych ward, and he you know the pain of staying alive was greater than the pain of killing
aye,
yourself. We both kind of talked about that, and I think that there is sometimes often, when people take their own life, that there is, they feel like they're doing a service to the people they love.
Yeah.
And and that's the really sad thing about it, is that sometimes people, how can I put this? They love you so much, they want to get out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're that unwell, and how unwell I was causing harm. Me specifically was your problem. And that breaks my heart because I was wrong about that.
Mm-hmm.
And some people don't get to find out they were wrong.
Yep.
And, I'm so sorry for your loss. And there's questions you're never going to be able to answer. But just to say, like, what you're doing is amazing off the back of this. And to watch you walk through it has been amazing. If there was ever an excuse in my mind on things that would make me pick up a drink or drug again, you just obliterated them, you know? And he's not, when people are no longer here, we have to be the voice for them.
Absolutely.
And I think had I not survived as well, I would, in hindsight, right, have wanted to be used as an example of why people need to ask for help.
Absolutely. And that's, we did the Baton of Hope walk on Sunday, and the guy Mike who organised it, his son took his life, Ross, and he left a letter for everybody, and he asked his dad just what you said. He says, please be a voice, advocate this, like mental health needs to be spoke about, and Mike, as a father has done that, and he's organised this Baton of Walk to raise awareness. It's
But he
poor
had
enough.
that in his own notes, and the notes he left.
Yep.
Isn't that so sad that he wanted other people to not take their life, but he himself felt too
Yep.
far? Do you get what I mean? Like
Aye.
this, like everyone, and I have a friend who's a psychologist, and she had a teenage client who took her own life. And the interesting thing about it was a friend of hers had talked about suicide to this person who had killed herself. And this girl who had taken her own life said, you must never ever do something like that. Promise me you'll never ever try something as stupid as that. And a week later, she did that.
Yep.
It's, you know, lots of people who are in that headspace will convince someone that it's a terrible idea for them.
Well, that's what my son Jamie did. His friend tried to take his life a couple of weeks before Jamie did, and Jamie stopped him. He got him to me, to a safe place, and Jamie stopped that happening. And I don't know, I'll never understand the process, obviously, of that, but kind of like I'd like to end it on like a happier note, because and I really, really hope that this conversation has helped somebody and somebody's got one thing from it, because I know that I have. And like you say, everybody has their own experience and we're all unique. We've all got our own thought processes. We can't think for other people. I can't think for Jamie. I can't think for you. You can't answer my questions, but just by you sharing your experience gives me a wee bit of healing, to and that will help me feel a wee bit stronger and able for me to help another human being. And you know, like I say, I've got to know you. And I said at the start, I think you're an amazing person, Ian, and I love how open and honest you are and you speak for the heart, and you're funny. Like you bring humour. And one question I wanted to ask before we wrap it up and go into something a wee bit happier, is excuse me, because I've got the menopause, right? So sometimes I forget what I was going to say. And I never write anything. I said that to you. I've not written anything. I've not scripted it. I just wanted it to just flow and let it be what it was going to be. No, I completely forgot what the question was going to be. Let me retrack my memories. It's so bad. Early menopause.
That's all right.
Um, I'll come back to it. It will come back to me. But I would like to ask you if you could share just, what you do now. No, sorry, that's what I was going to ask. It's came back, right? So before I forget, now I know that you've got a good life now, right? And I do want you to talk about that. But do you still struggle with that thought? Do you? I know that you're clean and you're sober, and I'm sure that that helps clear up your mind a bit. But I've spoke to other suicide survivors who still really battle with that thought that comes in to say that it's still a good idea, even clean and sober, to take your life. Do you still struggle, even though you've got a good life and you're doing the right things? Do these thoughts still come in, and are you aware, and do you know that it's not you and it's just the illness?
I I think that being clean and sober is one thing, and you can have other things apart from that. And when I got clean and sober, all my symptoms went away until I got to 5 years last summer. And my life is pretty busy and it's good. I do a lot of program stuff, but I always make time for my mental health, I thought, you know. But I guess post-pandemic, I work in travel insurance. It was our first busy summer. And I got 5 years clean in the July, and by the September, I was having suicidal thoughts again. And it's always the whole of my recovery being like, oh God, I could just, it creeps in and goes away in seconds. But it became, where it started to worry me was I stopped talking in meetings, and I always talk. And I didn't tell anybody that I was thinking it. And I remember sitting watching TV. I hadn't seen anyone outside of work. Work is not social life, it's work. I hadn't seen anyone out of work. I kept cancelling plans, just, little bits of isolation. And I remember it becoming a very loud thought, like, and the way it kind of manifests now is, you are probably going to fuck this up anyway, right? Which is really funny. Like, I've been able to do medical stuff since I got clean. Like, I've gone from living in a park to having an amazing life, and I've got younger looking. I don't know how to do it. But what a guy.
Honest.
But the bonus, yeah. But even when I moved into this flat 4 years ago, I didn't unpack for the first 3 months because I even thought then, you're going to fuck this up. And that thought comes in where it comes up as two things. You're probably going to ruin this anyway. And everyone's going to find out you're a fraud. You don't deserve this. And that is often a side effect of me just not taking care of myself. If I am third or fourth on my own list of priorities, I'm screwed. And the way that works for me now is I get up quite early in the morning. Every morning I'm up at 5:15. I like getting up early. I go to bed early. And the reason for that is soon as I'm a people pleaser still. So as soon as I step out into the world about 8:30, 9 o'clock, enjoying the working world, my whole life belongs to them. Everything after work becomes somebody else's. And then before I know it, I'm in bed. So I make time for myself in the morning. And it's important for me to make time for myself because life is busy and life is hectic and there's lots of other people, and that feeling that you're letting everybody down all the time will not go away if I don't take time to work out how I feel. And I have those thoughts when I don't address my own needs. And what happens when I don't address my own needs is I start getting upset that no one else is taking care of them for me. And that gap between expectation and reality is always anger. Always. And so, to look after myself is about constantly talking about the thing that doesn't seem like a big deal.
Yep.
The things I'm scared of, like every time I have money worries, my first thought is, I'm going to be living in a park in 3 days. That's not going to happen. I have to talk about it because otherwise I will slowly start thinking, well, if that's going to happen, neck yourself, right? So I learned that last year, just that, like I was saying earlier on when we were talking, my silence frightens me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because that means there's going to be a plan,
Yeah.
right?
And mm-hmm. Sorry.
So I was going to say, like, whatever, no matter how stupid it is, speak. And I found that as soon as you say it out loud, it just, all the power disappears. The minute I started talking last year, I don't know if you remember, about how I was feeling on meetings, I immediately stopped feeling like that.
Mm-hmm. It's
You
just
know,
breaking that power so that like nothing holds that power over you. I had a conversation with somebody on Sunday who wants to take her life, and she was crying to me and she said, I keep asking my mum for help. This is a family member. I keep asking my mum for help, but she doesn't help me. Um, there's a lot of mental health in my family. Now, I don't know if this is the same for you, hence why I'm going to ask the question. I always, and that I've learnt this myself. Now, I've got a good relationship with my mum. I love my mum dearly. She would do absolutely anything that I asked of her, but I would never go. There's certain things I wouldn't ask my mum for help for because my mum's also not had a great life. So there's things that she's not equipped to help me with. So if what my point was to, to this family member was, yeah, it's okay to ask for help, but ask the right people. Do you know, if you ask the wrong person for help and they can't help you, you're then let down again. And all those insecurities come back in and not feeling good enough. And why is she not helping me? So for me, I would always say to somebody, you know, ask for help, right? But ask the right people. Look for somebody who's doing the right things, who's living a positive life. Do you know, like we say in here, make sure their mouth matches their feet. Because you're not going to get help from people who've not been in similar situations that can help you through it. Would you say would you say that would be the right kind of thing, is to ask the right people for the right help?
yeah, if you know the right kind of people, this is the
Aye.
problem we rub against because, you know, when I was in that position, I hung around with people like me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I hung around with party people and they didn't want to talk about real stuff. And what I would say is, look, I remember when I was 23 talking to some friends of mine about how I was really worried about my drug taking. And I had a moment of clarity and I thought something terrible was going to happen. And they all just says, oh, come on, we'll go to Rockness, it'll be a riot and you'll get over it. Now, we were younger, granted, but when I think about how I maybe reacted back then to some people, they said they had problems as well. Their reality was making me uncomfortable. So I would say if you've spoken to someone and you haven't got the response that you want, it's not that that person doesn't love you. They just don't know what to do, right? And I would say, in hindsight, yeah, it's good to ask the right people. I don't know if I could have identified them when I was struggling, who those right
Yep.
people were. I think the people I would have gravitated to were people that wanted to drink and drug like me
Mm-hmm.
and say, sure, life's short, guy. Do you know what I mean? But I think as well, you need to give people the chance to help you. And the good news is if you're talking to someone and asking for help, that means there's something in you that wants to live. And
Aye.
that's something anyone can work with. And if you're not getting the response you need from your family because it's, I don't know, West Scotland, East of Scotland, whatever the culture is, we just don't talk about it in this family. Don't be so silly. You'd probably need to just work harder or get a hobby. You know, that's what it would have been in my house. Get a paper round. And I'd be like, I'm 36. But like, get on with it. Just take a deep breath
Aye.
and we don't get sick in this family. Then I think it's almost better to speak to someone who's non-biased that doesn't know you, like start with a GP. And I think now, yes, the National Health Service back home is under a lot of pressure, but they have questionnaires and things that they need to ask you, but you have to be explicit with your wording. And I do think that the thing that got in the way of me is I wasn't saying how bad I felt. There's still part of me, and I still have it, where I used to lie about how much I drank, say I didn't take drugs, and tell people I felt just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And if my experience of psychiatrists is they weren't able to help me if I was lying to them, and lying to them is leaving out important facts. If you have plans to take your own life, even if it's not a serious one, you think, tell someone so they can decide what to do with that information.
Yeah.
And a medical professional can read your mind. You don't need to convince them you're all right. You
Aye,
know,
I
you
know
need to tell
that's definitely
them,
that's really, really good advice. Do you know, like it's just I know it's hard for people to talk, but just say something, say anything. I definitely. And so before we wrap up, I would love if you could just tell us, like, because you're so funny, you brought so much humor to my recovery. The first time I met you, you made me laugh. Every meeting I go on, you make me laugh. And I'm not asking you to perform, you're not a dancing monkey or that, but what I just yes, go dance for me. And it's just, just to give people a wee bit of light that, if somebody's sitting in that place where they feel like everything's shite, that actually if we can push through that and take bits of these advice that you've gave, and push through that there is, light at the end of the tunnel. There is, the story doesn't need to end. You can change and change your thinking and have a better life. So just kind of give us a wee insight to what you do now, if that's all right, Ian.
yeah, so I mean, after I got clean, I'd love to say I stopped drinking and drugging and my life suddenly got better. Because it got harder because it was real. And whatever your thing is, whether it's, thinking about suicide is also numbing out. But once I decided to join reality, right, and take accountability for the problems in my life and want to do something about them, realized I was not going to be saved, right? No one is going to fix life for me, that I had to stand on my own 2 feet. Also, and this is maybe a bit controversial, is you have to stop thinking that life is happening to you. There's one thing I know, I do not get up in the morning and think about how I'm going to fuck people's lives over, right? If you think that's happening to you, it's not, right? No one gets up, stirs a big cauldron, and says, I'm going to ruin this person's life, right? But that is what I thought was happening to me, right? And once I was able to, I don't like to use the word victim, but once the story I was telling myself was I was always going to lose, I was always going to lose. And I'm not like super American, like, yeah, like you're a winner, but like what I decided to do was try and get to the end of the day. But after being homeless, I was very good at surviving. And I just wanted to pay attention to the little things getting better. And I also didn't pin my happiness on the grandiose. When I was younger, I wanted to be famous. I think I told you I can't drive a car because I thought I'd be driven everywhere. And I'm nearly 39. I thought I'd be famous. But I would say now in my life that I have now, it's very comfortable. And the old me didn't want that. I wanted to be something. I wanted to be a star. I wanted to be saved. And I wanted to be the center of everybody's minds. Like I don't have social media, for example. I don't have Facebook, Instagram, or any of that stuff. I got rid of it before I got clean because I was dying out there. None of it was true. I was feeding into something that wasn't real, and I just couldn't use it safely. And I think now you'll not meet anyone with more awe for the ordinary than me. Like my life is extraordinary because it's so normal. Like my favorite thing to do is go to the supermarket and buy whatever I want and not have to look at the prices. Not because I'm rich, but because I don't have it. I'm lucky enough I have pregnant, so I don't have any kids. And I would have been the fucking Handmaid's Tale, but it's just me and my dog, and I live in the center of Barcelona. I've had the same job for 5 years. My life is tomorrow. I'm going to get up and go to work. I'm going to do exactly the same as I did today, and there's no drama, And I think there's no what's going to happen, and there's no. I don't wake up. I've actually found that in the last 5 years, my memory's not as good because I'm not having to remember all my lies. I'm not having. and I want to wake up with a clean conscience, and that means that I have to take care of myself first. I try really hard to not start crap with others. I don't think about what people think about me because I found out that they're not thinking about me.
Mm.
And I would say I'm very into gratitude lists. I write 5 things I'm grateful for every single morning, and it doesn't need to be some ethereal. I've seen some gratitude lists that are like storybooks. I'm like, will you
Aye.
shut up? And it's usually just like 5 complaints. Sometimes it's coffee, my dog, my health. Like I can't believe I walk upstairs instead of taking the elevator because I can. One day
Yeah.
this isn't going to work. I'm so grateful that everything I put myself through, I still have my health. I can't believe I wanted to kill myself. You know, like there's part of me that's like, I'm so, if I had been successful in that, I'm so sorry for all the people that would have lost out meeting me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because my life has been so touched in the last 6 years, and I've been able to affect so many lives, you know, and it's really helped me. And I would say that if you are struggling and you can't see a way out at the moment, know this for sure. When you get through this and you feel better about it the way I do now, all the crap that you're going through now will be worth it because it will help someone else who's behind you. And you will be the person sitting telling someone, put it off until tomorrow and just stay alive today. And
Brilliant.
that's the only advice I've got for anyone is put it off until tomorrow and just stay alive until bedtime. And then get up again and start again. Life is so worth living, you know.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Honestly, Ian, thank you so much for coming along. I know that you're an hour ahead of us, so it'll be nearly your bedtime if you're getting up
Go to
at
my
5:15.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm so touched and I'm so blessed to be part of your journey now as well. Um, and you're such a good friend to me. Like, really, you are. I know that it's not like we hang about with each other and we're on the phone all day. It's not that kind of friendship, and that's not what it needs to be. Do you know? I know that if I needed you and I just phoned you or I sent you a message, I know for a fact you'd be there. And you've done this, you know, for me, for tonight, for Jamie's Sanctuary, for myself, and for anybody out there who's struggling, either sitting in that place, you know, where you sat or where I'm sitting on the other side of it. And you know, I know for a fact somebody's took something for this, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming along and doing that for me. So thank you to everybody who's watched as well, and speak out, reach out. If you need any help, feel free to message myself. And you know, one of the promise pledges on our website will be if I can't help you, I will definitely find someone who can. No matter what age, what gender, nothing. I will help you. So thank you. Thank you again, everybody. So I'm just going to stop the recording.